Okay, so you could classify these books as hard science fiction. However, they're also jam-packed with philosophy. To me, this trilogy is obviously about the characters' lives, which is, involving the philosophical, political, the soft sci-fi stuff, as well as the stages of terraforming, which is all the science and hard sci-fi. So in the first book, I can safely say that I enjoyed both the hard and soft aspects. I felt smarter after reading it, and it left me quite satisfied after reading the Anne versus Sachs debates. Those were very cool. It really painted the picture for both, you know, not only the challenges of the science behind everything that the characters had to go through, but also, the difference in just how people would, you know, perceive that idea of turning Mars into another Earth, basically. So I thought that was really interesting. So yeah, that's just a little afternote on that. So the second book was a little more interesting plot wise to me. Um, Another side note, I think back on the first book probably the most fondly, but that's just kind of like nostalgia reasons for reading it. It was a good one, but I think like plot wise, the second one was just a little bit more action packed. So yeah, for one, it included the Martian Revolution, very cool action packed stuff that I overall enjoyed reading. Aside from that, the terraforming stuff was pretty interesting too. Just seeing it all slowly coming together in the second one. Yeah, so basically, like when I say that reading these books made me feel smarter is just I was reading my first, or sorry, I was writing my first novel at the time, and it really helped with world building, not necessarily in the sense that you know the world building scientifically in my books were the same as in the Mars Trilogy by Kim Stanley Robinson, but just the attention to detail, and it really motivated me. Like, I did a lot of research for my first two science fiction novels, and that was largely inspired by this because I wanted, people who read my novel to really consider, like, wow, like just the science behind everything, even though mine can really not be considered hard sci-fi. uh, it's just the small details that I added in are definitely influenced from this trilogy. So yeah, that's pretty interesting. So now this was back when I wrote this paragraph here. I've now finished the entire trilogy, but this is what I said back then. So now I'm about 30 pages or so into the final book, and I can honestly say that some things have bothered me up to this specific point in the story. Although I did enjoy the first 100 in the first book, I thought they'd become background characters in the second. Side note again, just doing a little commentary off this paragraph. Basically, what I meant by that was, you know, John, uh, what were their other names? Frank, Maya, Arcady, all of the characters from the first book who, yeah, the first 100. I thought that they would kind of become secondary in the sense that, it'd more be their kids or like, other just new characters, younger characters, right, in this one. Um, yeah, so, and then back to the paragraph, which in a way they almost did become secondary characters. However, I can safely say that I am sick of them by this point in the third book. I do have my reasons. I feel that the trilogy is obviously the story of Mars being terraformed, which takes place over 100 years. And yeah, I know the gerontological treatments extended their lives by tenfold, but I mean, really, yeah, this is. I don't really agree with what I wrote here. This is just kind of spontaneous. Who wants to read a book about what old people are doing? Lol, fuck me, right? So basically, what I meant by that was, uh, I was just kind of sick of the first 100, but at this point in the story, mainly because you know I feel that uh, Kim Stanley Robinson kind of cherry picked which ones he went in depth in development. Like, for example, there were quite a few of them that stayed, you know, um, throughout the entire story, and we didn't really see much development on them. I mean, like, besides like a few character traits. And there were obviously the big ones that he went like all out on developing, like Maya, Frank, John. Well, he was dead at that point, but yeah. So um, let's just see. So yeah, back to the paragraph. I guess they're doing the same thing as the younger generations in the book, but seriously, sure, old protagonists that we've known forever. Sure, I guess maybe some people feel attachment to them by now and blah blah blah, but all the cool ones are dead. Arcady, John Boone, Frank, that was at this point in the story. Once you were at Blue Mars, the third book. I just don't want to read about 150-year-old Maya. Shit, I could barely handle her when she was young. I have to acknowledge Robinson on this point, though. I mean, yeah, he did do a good job on making her an easy to hate character for me, right? So he basically, with the first 100, he did create very human characters, absolutely. You know, so which and he established that super well throughout Red Mars and Green Mars. It's just, by Blue Mars, like, really they were established, and it was just kind of like telling the story of like what they're doing, like after, and like I was just, yeah, some of them I was kind of sick of at that point. That's just me. Okay, so that being said, I wish that the books would have focused on a new generation every book, and have the first 100 serve as background characters. This is the case for certain parts of the second and third books so far in the third. That's when I was reading the third. But I'd rather it focus on younger generations twice as much as they did. I feel that this would help make it seem more of a long journey for humanity, with new and different characters with every book. Even though it's believable that the first 100 are still alive throughout, I kind of wish they weren't. At this point in book 3, I care more about what's going to happen to Mars over the characters. Sure, a civil war is cool and all, but I just don't have any interest in these worn out characters, is the words I used for them. So yeah, basically, not to say like, granted, yeah, I was kind of ripping on the main characters in this story, like by the time I was on the third book, but the main reason for that is just like, like it almost seems like when you read about the characters, it's like, yeah, they've had long lives, but it'd really be more of an epic scope, long term kind of operation to terraform Mars if there were new characters with every book. And with these new characters, like, they'd have different ideas, obviously. And we did get some of this. There were definitely, like, second generation people, like Nurgle and what was her name, John Boone's granddaughter, Jackie or whatever. And yeah, I was gonna say, like, with these new characters, if this first 100 served as mainly background characters, some would take on the original ideologies of, like, Sax and Anne. Others would be completely different. They'd just be go about doing things completely differently as time went on. And like that, the books absolutely did do that. There were secondary characters, there were next generations of characters, absolutely. But basically what I'm saying by this is, if, like, I could change the trilogy and make it more to my liking, I would have made it focus on them more so than the first 100, to the point where the first 100 would barely even be mentioned, except kind of like as legends in the third book. Basically, that would just, to me, that would make it click a lot easier that this was an 100-year process. Even though, with life extension, that could just be used as an excuse to, as, like, how they're still alive and can make cameos. So other than that, those are really the only complaints I had about it. I would say that, the trilogy, like, to me, science is linear. It's gonna continue. It can't get shittier, right? Like, as long as it's, blew my fucking mind all throughout the trilogy, right? But with the character side of it, I did have some complaints, and those were them, basically, that near the end they were kind of rehashed, like the first 100, and I just kind of wish that Robinson would have focused more on new characters every single book. But yeah, that's basically it. That's my review for the Mars Trilogy by Kim Stanley Robinson.